Defining redlining and its origins. Redlining refers to the discriminatory practice where financial institutions, insurance companies, and government agencies denied services or offered inferior terms to residents of certain neighborhoods, predominantly based on racial composition. This practice originated in the 1930s when the Homeowners Loan Corporation, HOLC, mapped cities and marked areas with high black populations in red ink, deeming them risky for investment. The impact of redlining on housing markets. Redlining had a profound impact on housing markets by restricting access to home loans and mortgages in specific areas. As a result, many residents in these redlined neighborhoods, which were often minority communities, were unable to secure financing to purchase or improve homes. This led to long-term economic instability in these areas and limited upward mobility for many families. Racial segregation and urban development. Redlining exacerbated racial segregation by limiting black and minority communities' ability to move into more affluent, predominantly white areas. This created stark divisions in urban development, with redlined areas experiencing disinvestment, while other neighborhoods saw improvements and growth. The legacy of segregation is still visible today in many cities where wealth and resources remain unequally distributed. Long-term effects on wealth accumulation. Redlining prevented black families and other minorities from building wealth through homeownership, a key source of wealth accumulation in the U.S. since homeownership is often a family's largest asset. The inability to purchase homes in the early to mid-20th century set back generations of black Americans, creating an ongoing wealth gap between racial groups. Redlining and community infrastructure. Communities affected by redlining often suffered from underdeveloped infrastructure, including poor access to quality schools, hospitals, parks, and public services. The lack of investment in these areas contributed to the deterioration of neighborhoods and limited economic opportunities, making it difficult for residents to break the cycle of poverty and improve their living conditions. The role of government in redlining. While redlining was largely driven by private institutions, the U.S. government played a significant role by backing discriminatory practices through policies such as the Federal Housing Administration's refusal to insure mortgages in redlined areas. The 1968 Fair Housing Act aimed to eliminate these practices, but the lasting effects of redlining are still felt today in many urban centers. Redlining's impact on education and employment. The lack of investment in redlined neighborhoods also had a detrimental effect on local schools and employment opportunities. Poorer areas often faced overcrowded, underfunded schools, limiting the educational prospects of their residents. Additionally, without the ability to invest in local businesses or access quality job opportunities, economic mobility remained restricted, further entrenching cycles of poverty. The continuing legacy of redlining. Though redlining was made illegal with the Fair Housing Act, its legacy continues to affect urban development. Many cities today still reflect the economic and racial divisions that were created by these discriminatory practices. In some areas, lower property values and limited economic opportunities persist, perpetuating social and racial inequalities that have deep roots in historical policies. Modern-day redlining and discrimination. Although redlining as a formal practice is no longer legal, discriminatory practices still persist in more subtle forms. These include predatory lending, racial profiling in housing, and the continued disinvestment in predominantly minority communities. Additionally, gentrification in formerly redlined neighborhoods can push out lower-income, predominantly Black or Latino populations, contributing to displacement. Addressing the legacy of redlining. Efforts to address the effects of redlining include policies aimed at providing financial support to marginalized communities, promoting equitable housing development, and closing the racial wealth gap. Reforms such as affordable housing initiatives, community reinvestment programs, and policies designed to combat discrimination in lending are critical steps in correcting the long-standing impacts of redlining on urban development.